Let me tell you something that might challenge the way you see success. The wealthiest legacy families in the world, the ones whose names are not always on social media, the ones who quietly own blocks of buildings, entire funds, private equity firms, manufacturing chains, they follow financial rules that most people would never have the discipline to follow. And here is the uncomfortable truth. You are probably violating at least 3 of those rules right now. Not because you are lazy, not because you are unintelligent, but because you were never taught how real wealth actually thinks. I know this because I have spent the last 25 years sitting in rooms most people will never enter. I am a rabbi. I am also an investor. I built my first profitable company before I turned 32. I have advised founders whose companies generate more revenue in a quarter than most families earn in a lifetime. I have watched fortunes multiply quietly. I have also watched fortunes collapse loudly. And after decades of observing patterns, I can tell you this. Wealth is not built by what people buy. It is built by what they refuse to buy. Today, I am going to show you 5 things multi-generational Jewish wealth builders never spend money on. Not because they cannot afford them, but because they understand something deeper about capital, psychology, and time. And if you truly absorb this, you will start seeing money differently within the next hour. Let us begin. Number 1. They never spend money on visibility that does not produce leverage. Most people spend money to be seen. Wealth builders spend money to see further. There is a difference. A man gets his first large contract. He upgrades his car. He moves into a luxury apartment. He starts wearing brands that announce his arrival. But the families who think generationally do something else. They ask one question. Does this expense create future control? If the answer is no, it is rejected. Let me explain what I mean. A client of mine once closed a deal that netted him $480,000 after taxes. It was the largest single payout of his career at the time. He called me excited, already talking about a new Porsche. Instead, I asked him a different question. If you disappear tomorrow, what would this money still be doing for your children? Silence. That $480,000 did not become a car. It became equity in 2 small warehouse properties outside Dallas. 5 years later, those properties are worth nearly double. They produce monthly cash flow. They can be refinanced, leveraged, expanded. The Porsche would have produced admiration for 6 months. The warehouses produce income every month. There is a teaching in Pirkei Avot that says, "Who is wise? The one who sees what is being born." Wealth builders see consequences before they see pleasure. And that is why they rarely spend on things designed purely for external validation. Walk through certain neighborhoods in Brooklyn or Jerusalem where old money lives. You will not see supercars lined up like trophies. You will see modest vehicles, understated homes, disciplined lifestyles. But check property records. Check business registrations. Check trusts. The wealth is there. It is simply not performing for strangers. Here is the math most people ignore. Every $50,000 spent on visible consumption is not just $50,000 gone. At 9% annual compounded return over 25 years, it becomes over $430,000. You did not spend $50,000. You spent nearly $500,000 in future capacity. And the wealth builders understand this intuitively. They are not anti-luxury. They are anti-leakage. Now here is where this becomes even more serious. Because the second category costs people even more than visible spending. Number 2. They never spend money to accelerate something that requires patience. Modern culture worships speed, fast profits, fast scaling, fast exits, fast recognition. But wealth that survives 3 generations is almost always slow. In the Talmud, there is a principle that blessing rests only in that which is hidden from the eye. Growth that happens quietly tends to endure. I once consulted for a startup founder who raised $3 million in seed funding. Within weeks, he hired aggressively, upgraded offices, increased burn rate, launched marketing campaigns designed to dominate the market. It looked impressive, until revenue failed to match projection. Within 18 months, the company collapsed under its own expansion. Contrast that with a textile family I know in Antwerp. For 14 years, they expanded 1 warehouse at a time. No press releases. No flashy announcements. No overextension. Just incremental acquisition and reinvestment. Today they control distribution channels across 3 countries. Their competitors from that same era are gone. Patience is not passive. Patience is capital discipline over time. When you rush expansion to satisfy ego or investor pressure, you are spending money on speed. When you grow according to fundamentals, you are investing in durability. And durability compounds. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. How many of your recent financial decisions were made because you felt behind? Behind your peers? Behind your timeline? Behind your expectations? That feeling is expensive. Because when urgency replaces strategy, capital bleeds. Jewish wealth tradition treats money almost like a living partner. You do not force it. You guide it. You position it. You protect it. There is an old saying in the business circles I grew up around. Money runs from noise and stays where there is structure. If your financial life feels chaotic, rushed, reactive, unstable, wealth will not stay. If it feels steady, deliberate, strategic, wealth builds roots. And roots matter more than headlines. In the next part, I'm going to show you the third principle, the one that silently destroys more businesses than recessions ever could. And it has nothing to do with markets. It has everything to do with ego. Let me say something most entrepreneurs do not want to hear. More fortunes have been destroyed by ego than by economic collapse. Markets recover. Industries adapt. Technology evolves. But unchecked ego? It burns everything. And the wealthiest multi-generational families understand this so deeply that they build systems specifically designed to protect themselves from their own pride. They never spend money to defend their ego. That is principle number 3. Let me explain. There is a story in the Talmud about a wealthy merchant who refused to admit he had miscalculated the value of a shipment. Rather than accept a small loss and correct the error, he doubled down, then tripled down. Each decision was not based on logic. It was based on the need to be right. By the end of the year, he was bankrupt. Not because the market collapsed. Not because of theft. Not because of bad luck. Because his identity was attached to being correct. I have seen this exact pattern in modern boardrooms. A founder launches a product. Early data shows weak demand. Advisors suggest pivoting. Instead of adjusting, he pours more capital into marketing to prove the concept works. Another $500,000. Another $1 million. Eventually the runway disappears. But the spending was never about strategy. It was about pride. Jewish wealth culture treats humility not as moral decoration, but as financial insurance. In Proverbs it says, "Before destruction comes pride." Most people read that spiritually. Wealth builders read that operationally. Let me give you a real example. Several years ago, I advised a logistics company generating $22 million annually. The CEO was brilliant, but stubborn. He believed he understood every operational detail better than his managers. When 2 senior executives recommended investing in automation software, he dismissed them. "We've done fine without it," he said. For 3 years, competitors adopted automation. Margins improved. Errors decreased. Efficiency increased. His company stagnated. Finally, when he agreed to implement the system, the cost was triple what it would have been earlier, and he had already lost major contracts. The most expensive line item in his financial history? Delayed humility. Jewish billionaires do something different. They create advisory structures, boards, mentors, rabbinic council, legal oversight. Not because they lack intelligence, because they understand intelligence is distorted by ego. They do not spend money trying to look infallible. They spend money building correction mechanisms. And here is the deeper truth. When you attach your self-worth to your decisions, every mistake feels like death. So you defend it, protect it, fund it, even when it is wrong. But when your identity is rooted in values instead of validation, you can pivot without emotional collapse. There is a teaching in ethics of the fathers. Make for yourself a teacher. Notice it does not say, wait until you are confused. It says make one. Preemptively. The wealthiest families I know have generational advisors. Accountants whose fathers advised their fathers. lawyers who understand family trusts for decades, rabbis who know the family dynamics beyond business. These layers create accountability. Accountability protects capital. Now let us move to principle number 4. And this one is subtle. They never spend money on isolation. This might surprise you, because many wealthy individuals appear independent. But no generational fortune is built alone. Isolation is extremely expensive. When you isolate, you lose feedback. You lose perspective. You lose opportunity flow. In Jewish tradition, business is deeply communal. Relationships are currency. Reputation is infrastructure. I once visited a diamond trading floor in Manhattan. Deals worth hundreds of thousands of dollars were sealed with a handshake and a simple phrase, Mazel Ubraka. Why? Because reputation had been built for decades. Trust reduces transaction cost, and reduced transaction cost increases profitability. If you are constantly switching networks, burning bridges, avoiding community, you are paying hidden taxes. You pay more for deals, more for financing, more for talent, more for information. Jewish wealth families invest heavily in community institutions, schools, synagogues, charitable boards, business associations, not purely for philanthropy, but because embeddedness creates resilience. When crisis hits, community stabilizes you. During the 2008 financial collapse, I watched two investors with similar portfolios. One was hyper-independent, no strong communal ties. The other was deeply networked within his religious and business community. When liquidity dried up, guess who received private bridge loans from trusted associates? Guess who had insider deal access when distressed assets appeared? Isolation costs more than pride. Now pause for a moment. Look at your own financial life. Have you been spending money to appear successful? Spending money to rush growth? Spending money to defend ego? Spending money while isolating yourself from corrective voices? Each one leaks capital. But the final principle is the most powerful of all, and it determines whether wealth lasts beyond your lifetime. In part 3, I'm going to explain the generational transfer code, the system that quietly separates families who grow richer each generation from families who start over every 30 years. And once you see it, you will never think about money the same way again. Let me tell you something that almost nobody calculates. Building wealth is difficult. Keeping wealth is harder. Transferring wealth without destroying the next generation? That is the real challenge. And this is where most families fail. Not in the building, in the inheritance. There is a pattern economists have tracked for decades. Shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. The first generation builds it. The second maintains it. The third spends it. Why? Because money without philosophy becomes poison. And Jewish multi-generational wealth culture understands something most modern entrepreneurs ignore. If you do not transfer values, you are not transferring wealth. You are transferring ammunition. This is principle number 5. They never spend money raising financially illiterate children. That sounds harsh. But listen carefully. Many successful people invest enormous energy building businesses, and almost none preparing their heirs. They give their children comfort without context, access without accountability, resources without responsibility, and then they act surprised when entitlement replaces discipline. In Deuteronomy it says, "You shall teach them diligently to your children." Most people read that as religious instruction. Wealth builders read it as infrastructure. Education is not an event. It is a weekly system. That is why Shabbat dinner is not just a ritual meal. It is a classroom. Around that table, children hear how deals are evaluated, how risk is measured, how charity is allocated, how losses are handled, how gratitude is expressed. Financial intelligence is absorbed long before adulthood. By the time a child turns 18, they have witnessed hundreds of discussions about money framed through responsibility instead of consumption. Compare that to the average household. Money is either secret, or stressful, or emotional. Children either see overspending, or fear, or silence. Then at 25, they inherit assets they were never trained to manage. That is not wealth transfer. That is delayed collapse. Let me give you a real example. A family in London built a chain of manufacturing businesses over 40 years. The founder was disciplined, strategic, patient. By the time he was 68, the company was worth over $90 million. But he avoided talking about money with his children. He believed protecting them from pressure was kindness. When he passed unexpectedly, 3 siblings inherited equal shares. Within 5 years, one forced aggressive dividend extraction. One wanted to sell immediately. One wanted to reinvest heavily. Conflict escalated. Litigation followed. The company was eventually sold below its peak valuation. 40 years of discipline dissolved in half a decade. Now contrast that with a family I know in New Jersey. From age 12, their children attended quarterly family board meetings. They reviewed simplified financial statements. They discussed charitable allocations. They voted on certain minor investment opportunities. By the time those children were adults, capital was familiar, not intoxicating. When the father transitioned leadership, there was no chaos. There was continuity. Here is what Jewish wealth builders understand deeply. Wealth is not numbers. It is identity. If your children see money as status, they will spend it. If they see money as stewardship, they will multiply it. And stewardship must be trained. Now let us go deeper. Another hidden rule they follow. They never spend money without assigning it a role. Every dollar has a job. Consumption, investment, charity, liquidity, education. Unassigned money disappears. Structured money compounds. In many traditional Jewish households, income is divided intentionally. A portion for living, a portion for reinvestment, a portion for tzedakah, charity, a portion reserved. That structure creates clarity. Clarity reduces impulse. Impulse destroys compounding. I once asked an elderly investor in Jerusalem, a man whose real estate portfolio spans 3 continents, what the secret to durability was. He smiled and said something simple. Every dollar must answer to someone. In his case, that someone was a framework established decades earlier. Spending required purpose. Investment required alignment. Philanthropy required intention. Nothing drifted. Drift is expensive. Now pause. Look at your own structure. If you received $2 million tomorrow, would there be a predefined allocation system? Or would decisions happen emotionally, socially, reactively? Wealth builders remove randomness. Because randomness introduces erosion. And erosion compounds just like returns do. But we are not finished. There is one more principle, perhaps the most misunderstood of all. It has nothing to do with frugality, nothing to do with austerity. It has everything to do with spiritual positioning. In Part 4, I'm going to explain why the wealthiest legacy families never chase money directly, and why chasing money is often the fastest way to repel it. This is where most ambitious people get it completely backwards. And correcting this alone can change the trajectory of your next 10 years. Let me say something that sounds contradictory. The families who build the most enduring wealth do not chase money. They position themselves so that money chases them. Most people reverse this. They pursue income. They pursue bigger deals. They pursue higher salaries. They pursue trends. And the harder they chase, the more fragile their financial life becomes. Because when you chase money directly, you become dependent on opportunity cycles you do not control. But when you build value structures, money becomes a byproduct. There is a concept in Jewish thought. Blessing rests on order, not on chaos, not on desperation, not on obsession, on order. I once sat with a private equity manager in New York whose firm manages over $1 billion in assets. I asked him what separated founders who became wealthy from founders who became durable. He said something I will never forget. The durable ones stop asking, "How much can this make?" and start asking, "How much value does this create?" That shift sounds small. It is enormous. When your primary lens is extraction, you build thin relationships. When your primary lens is value, you build deep ecosystems. Deep ecosystems survive downturns. Thin extraction models collapse under pressure. Think about it this way. If your business disappeared tomorrow, Would your clients scramble to replace you? Or would they quietly move on? Jewish wealth builders obsess over indispensability, not popularity, not virality, not applause. Indispensability. There is a teaching in Pirkei Avot that says, if I am only for myself, what am I? Read that financially. If your enterprise serves only your enrichment, it remains small. If it genuinely strengthens others, clients, partners, community, it grows roots. Roots attract stability. Stability attracts capital. Let me give you an example. During the early 2000s tech expansion, many founders focused purely on rapid valuation growth. Exit quickly. Maximize multiples. Move on. At the same time, there were quieter operators building infrastructure companies, payment systems, logistics software, compliance tools. Not glamorous, not flashy, but essential. 2 decades later, many of the fast exit founders are irrelevant. The infrastructure builders control foundational systems. Money flows to infrastructure. Now here is where this becomes personal. If you constantly feel financial anxiety, it may not be because you are not earning enough. It may be because you are positioned incorrectly. If your income depends on constant hustle, constant visibility, constant selling, you are chasing. If your income depends on ownership, systems, recurring value, you are positioned. Positioning reduces stress. Stress leads to reactive decisions. Reactive decisions leak capital. There is another layer to this. Jewish wealth culture integrates charity, tzedakah, not as an afterthought, but as a structural component of wealth. This confuses outsiders. Why give away money while building wealth? Because generosity recalibrates your relationship with money. When money becomes your master, you chase it. When money becomes your tool, you direct it. And paradoxically, those who treat money as a tool tend to accumulate more of it. I have watched business owners increase charitable commitments during profitable years, not decrease them. Not recklessly, strategically, because it reinforced stewardship over greed. And stewardship sustains clarity. Now understand something critical. This is not mystical thinking. It is psychological alignment. If your entire identity is net worth, you will panic at volatility. If your identity is contribution plus ownership, volatility becomes navigable. Chasing money creates fragility. Building value creates gravity. Gravity pulls capital toward it. And this leads us to the final principle, the one that determines whether everything we have discussed becomes theory or transformation. In Part 5, I'm going to tie all 5 principles together into a practical framework. Not philosophy, not inspiration. A structure you can apply starting this week. Because knowledge without execution is just entertainment. And wealth builders do not consume ideas. They implement them. You now have the 5 principles. But principles alone do not build wealth. Structure does. So let me give you something practical, something you can apply immediately. Because the difference between consumers and builders is not information. It is implementation speed. Let us review the 5 rules quickly. Do not spend on visibility without leverage. Do not spend to accelerate what requires patience. Do not spend to defend your ego. Do not isolate yourself from corrective structure. Do not chase money. Build value so money is drawn to you. Now here is how you turn those into action. Step 1. Audit your last 90 days. Not casually. Not emotionally. Open your bank statements. Business accounts. Credit cards. Categorize every dollar into 3 buckets. Consumption. Asset building. Ego or impulse. Be honest. You will likely discover something uncomfortable. Most people are not under-earning. They are over-leaking. Small visible upgrades. Small emotional purchases. Small rushed decisions. Each one feels harmless. Together, they suffocate compounding. Step 2. Create what I call a capital command rule. No financial decision over a fixed number. Choose your number, maybe $1,000 or $5,000, is made without a 48-hour separation from emotion. No exceptions. Wealth builders build friction into spending. Consumers remove friction. Friction protects capital. Step 3. Assign roles to every dollar that enters your life. Before money arrives, decide its job. For example, 50% reinvestment, 20% living, 10% liquidity reserve, 10% education or skill development, 10% structured generosity. The percentages may differ for you, but the principle does not. Unassigned money disappears. Directed money compounds. Step 4. Install correction. Advisors, mentors, accountability partners, financial professionals. Not because you are incapable, because you are human, and humans are emotional. Remember this. Ego feels powerful in the moment, but discipline builds power over decades. Step 5. Think in decades. Every major decision must answer one question. Does this strengthen my position 20 years from now? If the answer is unclear, slow down. Speed without clarity is expensive. Let me tell you something personal. When I built my first company, I nearly lost it in year 3. Revenue was growing. Recognition was increasing. But my expenses were expanding faster than my assets. I upgraded too early, scaled too fast, ignored subtle warning signs because growth felt intoxicating. It took one difficult quarter to wake me up. I sold unnecessary assets, cut vanity expenses, restructured debt, reinvested strategically. That painful season became the foundation of everything that followed, because I stopped trying to look successful and started trying to become durable. Durability is not glamorous. It does not trend on social media, but it outlives hype. There is a reason certain families remain financially strong for generations. It is not luck. It is not conspiracy. It is not magic. It is structure plus discipline plus transmission. They teach their children early. They avoid capital leakage. They remove ego from decisions. They embed themselves in community. They build value ecosystems. They think in half centuries, not half years. And here is the most empowering part. None of this requires you to be born into wealth. It requires you to think differently starting now. The Torah has survived empires, exile, economic collapse, technological revolution. Its financial wisdom survived because it is rooted in human nature, and human nature has not changed. Impulse still tempts. Ego still blinds. Impatience still seduces. Status still distracts. And discipline still wins. So here is your challenge. This week, not next month, implement one structural change. Cancel one vanity expense. Delay one emotional decision. Schedule one financial review. Open one investment account. Have one serious conversation with your family about money. Small structural shifts, repeated consistently, create exponential outcomes. Wealth is rarely one dramatic event. It is quiet alignment over long periods of time. If you apply even half of what you have learned across these 5 parts, your financial trajectory will not just improve, it will stabilize. And stability is the soil where real wealth grows. Most people will watch something like this and nod. A few will implement. The few always separate themselves. Decide which category you belong to. Because money does not respond to wishes. It responds to structure. And now you have one.